Welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday class that shall not be named. We're so excited to be here as we prepare for the high holidays. As many of you know, Slichot will be coming up this Saturday, and then next Wednesday, I think, Wednesday night, we have Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Of course, it's open, but we do passes now because of just for security, so you can get your passes ahead of time. If you forget your passes, you can get them when you get here. It's no big deal. So just make sure everybody knows about that. And welcome. Again, we're going to welcome everybody on gallery view. Welcome to David and Michael and Genevieve and Jeff. And of course, Rena, Flossie, Arlene, and the disembodied hand that we sometimes call Ron. We're going to conclude our study this week of the high holidays, and then we're going to take a couple weeks off. Obviously, next week is Rosh Hashanah, and then the week after we reference. So I'm going to just take like 2 or 3 weeks off from the class. I apologize, but it just makes it a little easier to get everything done. And then I have a speaking engagement at a school. I will, for sure, the next 2 weeks will be off, maybe the next 3, and I apologize. We try not to miss too many days. And again, as for what's coming up, Slichot this weekend, Rosh Hashanah next Wednesday and Thursday, and then Yom Kippur a week, 2 weeks from Friday and Saturday. So please come on in, and we look forward to seeing you for all the things. If you have any questions about what we're doing, we send out packets. If you didn't get one, just let us know. And if you're a member or not a member, just let us know, and we'll send you all the information. So it should be fun. It should be exciting. I'm not nervous at all. What I'm doing now is I'm getting all my sins like lying out of the way now, so I'm going to be forgiven a week from Wednesday, and then at least judged. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the concluding.
That's very Catholic of you.
Thank you. I support all religions. I'm there for everybody. We're going to look at the concluding holiday, which comes at the end of Sukkot today, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and then talk a little bit, if we have time, about some look at some books that are pretty nice for the holidays, and then talk about some ways to prepare, which is really nice. I found some nice articles about it. So we're going to start off with the end of the holidays. As we know, we've already talked about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and how Rosh Hashanah, there's very little in the text about it. Just a little bit more about Yom Kippur, but still very little. A lot more about Sukkot, but that's evolved a lot. But Sukkot is kind of weird, as we mentioned, not because we do the booths and we shake the lulav and etrog, which to some might be seen as weird, but it's weird because of this passage that we find in Leviticus when they're detailing the holidays, or Vayikra. And the Eternal spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, On the 15th day of the 7th month is the Feast of Tabernacles, for 7 days unto the Eternal. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no manner of work. That's basically the same edict for all holidays, not a big deal. 7 days you shall bring an offering made by fire unto the Eternal. Bringing offerings is very common, although this is a 7-day holiday, very, very, very much longer than the other ones we've seen. And then it says, on the 8th day shall be a holy convocation. That is something new and different. On the 8th day shall be a holy convocation. Now, making offerings by fire and a solemn day of assembly, no work, that's all the holidays. It's no change there. But as we saw when we talked about it previously, it says that, and it says in other places, 7 days. And it says other places that the holiday is 7 days. But here, as in other places, it says on the 8th day shall be a holy convocation. What is interesting is that the holiday is 7 days, but then it says the 8th day is a holiday. So the first day is a holiday, and the 8th day is a holiday, except for Sukkot is only 7 days. So we've added an 8th day, and they tell us absolutely nothing about it in terms of how they celebrate beyond the usual. What I mean by the usual is sacrifice and resting. From Numbers, Bamidbar, on the 8th day you shall have a solemn assembly, which is a little different. A solemn assembly is kind of different, so that could be, they don't mention that for all the holidays. You shall do no manner of work. You shall present a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, of a sweet savor unto the eternal. Now, getting specific into what you're offering is a little different. 1 bullock, 1 ram, 7 he-lambs of the first year without blemish. Their meal offering and their drink offering for the bullock, for the ram, and for the lamb shall be according to the number after the ordinance. And 1 he-goat for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering and the meal offering thereof, and drink offering thereof. So, except for David, most of us don't do these things anymore. I mean, David is a literalist, so David, we know, sacrifices these exact animals, but the rest of us don't. So the only interesting thing about it is it's different. It's an 8th day. It came out of nowhere. The only thing it really says that is different, maybe that's a solemn assembly, and then it's very specific about what you're sacrificing. But what doesn't it tell us? It doesn't tell us everything. We have absolutely no idea why this holiday's here. It's similar to Rosh Hashanah. That Rosh Hashanah, you blow the shofar, but it doesn't tell you anything about the holiday. Michael.
A question. It says to sacrifice. It doesn't tell us how. And, kosher meat, you have a shochet who has to, there's all sorts of rules. Is there any record of any history of the rules for how the sacrifice is done?
All the rules for the sacrifice from the biblical age, especially from the Torah, only comes from the Torah. We have no outside source of how they were sacrificing in the desert. The first temple, we have an idea of this area where the Holy of Holies was, but we don't even know that. So beyond what you see in the text, we don't know. There are other places where they give more specifics in the text about sprinkling blood in the altar. But as to the exact nature of how they're killing it, we do see sections that say no, the blood's, you're supposed to let the blood out for kosher. But a lot of it is not given. It's basically what you see in the text. So we know there were various different types of offerings, such as sin offering and guilt offering and burnt offering. We know that different animals were used, ram, lambs. We know that there are laws that say, for instance, if you can't afford a bullock, a ram, or lambs, which could probably be expensive, you're allowed to use a dove or grain in place of them. So we have things like that. We know the clothing the priest was wearing. We have descriptions of that. We know it was done in a certain place in the tent of meeting or outside the tent of meeting. We know that. Ron.
Yeah, quite a while ago, I read an article and regarding the sacrifice for the Jewish holidays. And it was pretty modern, because what it said was, if you do something all the time and you give that up for the day, that's considered a legal sacrifice.
And that is a very good interpretation of how the rabbis have looked at this, especially when sacrifice ceased to exist. Sacrifice became giving up something like no food or making amends for your sins. So these are exactly how the holiday evolves. However, in Leviticus Numbers, we see only a few things about this holiday. It's on the 8th day, solemn assembly, no work, you're sacrificing. That's all we know. So we have absolutely no idea how they celebrate this. We also know that Sukkot is very specifically two things. It's a pilgrimage holiday and a festival holiday. I'm sorry, pilgrimage holiday and a harvest festival holiday. Doesn't say that here, although it does say you are sacrificing animals. So what this could mean is it's an end to the holiday season. It's a final end. And that is, but that's extrapolating. It doesn't actually say that. So we're going to look at what people decided, the rabbis and sages decided about this holiday, because kind of like Rosh Hashanah, you just kind of have to figure it out. As the years go by, we can tell how people celebrated this holiday going back to the time of the Mishnah 2,000 years ago, but not 3,000 years ago or 3,500 years ago. So let's look at what some commentators say about it. Rashi, and again, this is much later, the 11th century, as in France, maybe the greatest commentator of all time. You shall hold a solemn assembly. The Agadic interpretation is that during the course of the festival of Sukkot, they, meaning the Jews, offered sacrifices corresponding to all the 70 nations. As they were about to depart, the omnipresent said to them, "Please, I ask you to prepare a small meal for me so that I might derive pleasure from you." So Rashi is saying this is a final moment where we're making a sacrifice to honor God, because what we've been doing before is making forgiveness. We've been celebrating, we've been honoring the other nations of the world. And now this final moment is a moment for us to prepare a meal for God. So it's the last moment, and so it's a connection to God. But then later in Leviticus, a commentary of the same person, Rashi, said, "It shall be a solemn assembly. God says, I've detained you in the manner of a king who invited his children to feast with him for a designated number of days. When the time came for them to depart, he said, my children, please remain with me for one more day, for it is difficult for me to part from you." This is probably the way this holiday is viewed by most. It is a family reunion. Have we done this already? I feel like I may have done this with you. Did we do this last week?
No.
Okay, good. I mean, deja vu could be from last year. Family reunion ends on Wednesday. We all say, this has been amazing. Let's do it one more day. Let's extend it one more day and we'll enjoy it. And I think that's what Rashi's saying here. We've had this amazing experience. Let's spend one more day thinking about God as we officially conclude this holiday season. And so this is how he looks at it. He doesn't give the holiday name, although by this time they already has a name. But again, it's all about, excuse me, how we look at the holiday and the idea that it's time to spend time with God. It's time to relax. It's time to say, hey, we had a great time. We had a great holiday. And now we're concluding it in a great way. I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that holidays are so rushed and there's so much going on that in this way, we're not rushing the end. Like we've been rushing, now we can just kind of enjoy the last day. And I think that's a lot as to what it means to so many people. So any questions or even the name, which is like Shmini Atzeret, which is eighth of the eighth day or the eighth Atzeret. Atzer kind of means hold back, like we're almost holding back this day or this time so we can continue to think about it. That's just the root. So the idea that Atzeret is kind of a day of assembly. It's also hold back, keep this a little bit longer. And it's really a beautiful way of looking at it. Now, for a lot of people, obviously, this holiday is not as prominent because we've already had all these other holidays. So it's also a way of saying, listen, we've had all these holidays, we're exhausted. Let's not forget that there's still meaning in this and that we're going to still celebrate after all the hubbub is over. So when we continue this, we're going to look at some other sections. Now we're not looking at here, as you can see, we're looking a bit later. We'll go back to the Mishnah in a little bit. We're going to go a little bit later to Sefer HaChinuch, which is from the 13th century Spain. Of course, Spain in the 13th century was still in the final phases of the golden age of Spain. So it was a great time. And this rabbi, Aharon Halevi, or Levi, Barcelona. And if you should ask, if Shmini Atzeret is such a joyful occasion for the Jewish people, then why do they not hold the lulav on that day? The explanation is that the eighth day is dedicated completely to God, just as our sages related in the parable of the king, and invited his children to feast with him, and at the end asked them to remain one more day because their parting from him was so painful. Therefore, the comma there is called Atzeret, and for this reason it requires no other commandments. If I fix that. So, a couple things. He is referencing what we just saw from 200 years ago from Rashi. This is a day where the king says, which we just saw right here, let's stay another day feasting. But he's also saying something that is essential in another way. We do not shake the lulav on this day, which means to him that this is a separate holiday from Sukkot. It's kind of attached, but it is a separate holiday from his perspective, which is amazing because we haven't been told that. Remember, everything we're told about this holiday is new to us. We don't know how they celebrated during the biblical holidays. We learn more. So for him in 13th century Spain, Shmini Atzeret is the name, and we don't shake the lulav on Etrog. And they, again, obviously he still read Rashi somehow. So Rashi was pretty, I think it would probably be pretty cool to know if I got to come back in 200 years to see that great scholars are using me as a reference. I think that would be really incredible to know. So from Pesikta Rabbati, which is a much earlier, and this is Midrash, which is filling the gaps. They use Isaiah as a reference. You have increased the nation of God. When you give holidays to the nations of the world, they eat and drink and carouse and enter their theaters and circuses and anger you with their conduct. But when you give holidays to the people of Israel, they eat, drink, rejoice, and enter the synagogues and houses of study where they offer much prayer, many holiday offerings, and many sacrifices. Therefore, the verse states, the eighth day shall be a solemn day of assembly. So him, it's more of a solemn day. But I'm thinking, I think it was the Annie Hall. Anybody here seen Annie Hall?
Yes.
It's a scene where he's at the dinner table with Woody Allen is at the with Diane. What's her name? Diane Keaton.
Diane
And
Keaton.
he's talking about how they're sitting so proper at the dinner table, and he does the slash across the screen where his family are screaming and yelling as they're grabbing food.
Yeah.
And she asked the soon-to-be mother-in-law asked her Machatunam, what do you do to celebrate the upcoming holidays? And he says, well, we go to synagogue and atone for our sins. That's how we celebrate the holiday. Now we go to services and then we atone for our sin by fasting. So in this Midrash, it's acknowledged that we celebrate a little differently. Okay? We do eat and drink for holidays and rejoice, but we go to services, and we read prayers for hours on end. So it's a little different, but also he seems to say this is a little bit more solemn of a day, Whereas we saw earlier from Rashi and for Rabbi Halevi that it's more of a extra day of feast. So we know it could be an extra day of feast, or maybe it's a solemn day. We know it's possibly not connected to Sukkot, as we see here, because we don't shake the lulav, which seems possible, because even though it is connected to Sukkot in Numbers and Leviticus, it's very clear it has nothing to do with the harvest, because they don't mention the harvest. They mention sacrificing animals. And yet it is still a very strange holiday. From the Mishnah from Rosh Hashanah, we do know it is overall a festival of the agricultural festival because it is the time of rain. So in Mishnah, Rosh Hashanah, they know, obviously they're telling us this is the time of rain. We know this. But in Mishnah Ta'anit, it says, Rabbi Judah says, the last prayer leader on the last of the holiday of Sukkot makes mention of the rain in his prayers. The first prayer leader does not. So what does this mean? It means that possibly the holiday of Shmini Atzeret is the last day where they make mention of rain. That we don't know. So again, as you can see, it is a very difficult holiday to really figure out what it is. That's why it's not, in many ways, not as well known. Now, what is well known today about Shmini Atzeret? What else is it connected with? It is connected with another holiday which people are more aware of. When we think of the end of Sukkot, we don't think Shmini Atzeret, we think of Simchat Torah. Right. Which is what we celebrated then. That's when we parade the Torah and we're dancing with the flags and having a great time. We don't see that anywhere here. We don't see that in Leviticus and Numbers because the Torah obviously hadn't been finished yet. We don't see it from Rashi, at least not in this section, or from Rabbi Levi. We don't see it in Pesachta Rabbati, the Mishnah. So let's go a little bit more and talk about Simchat Torah. And we're going to look at it from this modern scholar, Mordechai Margaliot, in his book, The Division of the Torah into Portions for the Purpose of Public Reading, and one portion is read each Shabbat, was different in Babylonia and in Israel. So this is probably true. That, remember, there were two major communities in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd centuries, Israel and Babylon. Israel was probably the more prominent, but as time went on, the Babylonian community is going to be much more prominent. So the 200s is when the exodus of scholarship and leadership from Israel really starts to go to Babylon. There's already people going back and forth studying, but in the 200s, the 3rd century, the leadership educationally and spiritually and religiously are going to move to Babylon because the Roman are a little bit harsher. And the various groups, first the Sassanids, and then the Caliphate, the Muslim Caliphate, are going to be very welcoming to the Jewish community. So they're going to develop different traditions in Babylon and Israel. A lot of our traditions, though, are based on what happens in Babylon. In Israel, a smaller portion was read than in Babylonia. The portion read in Israel was called a Seder, and the portion read in Babylonia was called a Parsha. When we go to services and we read from the Torah, do we say we're reading the Parsha or the Seder?
The Parsha.
We said we're reading the Parsha, so it tells you right away our traditions come from Babylonia in this case, really cemented in the 9th century by the Gaonim. The Torah in Babylonia was divided into 54 parshiot. That's what we have today. corresponding to the number of Sabbaths in a leap year, same as today. There are those in Israel who divide the Torah into 155 or 175 portions. That is a lot of portions. The Jews of Babylonia who read a parsha each Sabbath and who thereof completed the Torah every year established Simchat Torah the day after Shmini Atzeret, as opposed to the Jews of Israel who read a Seder, which was shorter than a parsha on each Sabbath and would complete the Torah only once in 3 to 3.5 years. They would not celebrate Simchat Torah on a fixed day each year, but rather when it happened to be completed in the synagogue. Now, where does the tradition of Simchat Torah come from? It's not biblical, obviously. It's not even from Israel. It comes from Babylon, where a lot of our traditions come from after the Talmud is finished. A lot of the traditions are cemented by the Geonim. So the Geonim said, we're going to read the whole Torah in one calendar year, starting and finishing on Simchat Torah. Is that how we do it today? Absolutely. So the day after the major holiday of Shmini Atzeret is the day we start the year, basically. So now Sukkot is 9 days long, according to tradition. Now, what's also interesting is, anybody here ever been a member of a conservative synagogue?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? So what some conservative synagogues do a triannual reading. They divide each Torah portion into 3. And this year we read Torah portion A. Next year we read Torah portion B. The next year Torah portion C. And then on the 4th year we start A again. We do it every 3 years. We finish the Torah. Why do they do that? Because there's precedent. They can go back and say, well, in Israel, 1,800 years ago, they were doing a triannual portion and we're doing the same thing. So in the conservative movement, they're not going to make any alterations unless they have a precedent. And this is a very obvious precedent. They can say, and we have a lot of scholarship on this, not just from here, that they in Israel used to read 1/3 of the portion. And so that's what they're at least doing. So let's go to Michael Strassfeld, who was a pretty well-known guy in the renewal movement and the Chavarah movement, as they call it. And this is coming from The Jewish Holidays, a Guide and Commentary. If you haven't read it, it was a very popular book in the 80s and 90s, and still is, on the holidays. And it's definitely one to look at. It's a pretty easy read. If we look at the festival cycle, Shmini Atzeret seems analogous to Shavuot, which we have seen was called by the rabbis Atzeret. Just as in certain ways Shavuot, a one-day festival, is the conclusion to Passover, a 7-day festival, so Shmini Atzeret, a one-day festival, is the conclusion to Sukkot, a 7-day festival. So Passover is 7 days. And then the 50th day after Passover starts is Shavuot. And that is not the official conclusion to the holiday, but but Passover and Shavuot are linked. Passover is the holiday of freedom. We get to be free. We leave Egypt. Shavuot is the holiday of the Torah. It's the holiday of meaning when we get the Torah at Mount Sinai. So freedom without meaning is useless. If we don't have a purpose in life, freedom is meaningless. So he's saying Shmini Atzeret is the conclusion to Sukkot, but a different holiday. Just like Shavuot is the conclusion to Passover, even though it's a different holiday. Did I make that clear? I hope I made that clear. I can make it a little confusing.
It's confusing.
Yes, it is. Okay, so just think of Passover and Shavuot as holidays that work together. Passover is the holiday of freedom. Shavuot is the holiday of purpose. They work together as with the harvest. Sukkot is the harvest holiday. It concludes then with Shmini Atzeret, which is its conclusion. So basically, Shmini Atzeret and Passover are both conclusions to a holiday. So, according to one midrash, Shmini Atzeret, and I'm going to invite everybody to conclude for 1 second. I'm going to call. I think somebody may have passed away. Let me just take this 1 second. I apologize. I'm going to take 1 second just to make sure they know I got the call. And let me call 1 second. Take a moment amongst yourself, guys.
Michael, you look way too comfortable.
Well, it's a very nice day, and for a change, they're not mowing the golf course as I sit out here. So it's nice to be outside.
Yeah, it is.
It's nice.
It's nice out there.
Cool.
We getting a big storm?
Yeah, probably.
It's raining here in Richmond Hill right now.
Yeah, it's drizzling.
You guys supposed to do yard work.
And I'm on the border of Richmond Hill.
Yeah.
Rena, we like your curls.
What was it?
We like your curls.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. Hi.
Bye.
Hi. Hi, Irene. Yeah, I happen to be home right now, so I tuned in.
Good, good.
How was your trip, Floss?
It was very nice. I was telling Arlene and Ron, I called it a love fest. I started with a friend who's fighting cancer and then went around different areas of Pennsylvania and came home by way of Philly. It was very nice. Thank you. But it's good to sleep in your own bed, you know.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, sometimes you need a vacation from your vacation.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes
What parts of Pennsylvania? Oh, go ahead.
I was in Philly, I was in Mount Pocono, I was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I was telling them New York, and it's just so loud and so big. It's good to be here. It's quieter.
Now, I know you didn't drive.
No, I Jeff, my arms are tired. I was doing a lot of flying here.
You know, it's too bad. Flossie told us that when she was in New York City, the place looked very dirty. And I remember we used to go to New York City a lot, and it was always clean.
That's right.
It's terrible now.
Flossie, where were you? You weren't in Times Square, were you?
I was near there. I have two friends I stayed with in Center City. Yes.
Where?
When
No,
was New York
Times
City ever
Square. I meant
clean?
New York City.
New York City, that's what I'm saying. One is right near the Roosevelt Tramway.
Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry
Yeah.
about that, everybody.
See you later.
Appreciate you letting me
Okay.
say that. So we're talking about Shmini Atzeret again. And let's continue with what Michael Strassfeld has to say. According to one midrash, Shmini Atzeret should have taken place 50 days after Sukkot, just after Shavuot falls Pesach. So what they're saying, it should be even more like they should put Shmini Atzeret 50 days later instead of 1 day later. However, Shmini Atzeret would have then fallen in the midst of the rainy season, a difficult time for pilgrims to travel to Jerusalem. Therefore, God ordained that Shmini Atzeret immediately follows Sukkot. They are analogies between Shmini Atzeret and Shavuot. So what they're saying is the only reason Shmini Atzeret is not 50 days after Sukkot is because Judaism is a practical religion and it would be in the middle of the rain and it could be flooding. So Shmini Atzeret should be just like Shavuot in that it concludes a holiday season later on. Therefore, okay, there are other, I read that part. Both begin with only temple and agriculturally related rituals. With the destruction of the temple, Shavuot successfully made the transition to a historical festival commemorating the revelation at Sinai. Shmini Atzeret at first consisted only of Tefillah Geshen, the prayer for bountiful rainfall in the coming winter months. Because it was not directly tied to the temple, the prayer for the rain remained Shmini Atzeret's sole distinction. So what does Shmini Atzeret become? In tradition, it becomes the day we pray for rain. That's the day we pray for rain. That we want rain to start on Shmini Atzeret so we can get our crops. We can get our crops fed.
Thanks.
All right. However, the beginning around the 10th century, Shmini Atzeret, actually the second day of Shmini Atzeret, as Shavuot had earlier, began to take on the character of a festival of Torah. All right, so this is really important. So, and we'll talk about it again. Sukkot is a holiday of harvest. Shmini Atzeret is the day we pray for rain. Why would Shmini Atzeret be, of all the holidays, the least apropos holiday to Jews living around the world, if you don't live in Israel? If Shmini Atzeret's the day we pray for rain, what's the problem?
Yeah, a lot of places you don't need to pray for rain.
Exactly. I am not in a farming community. It's about to have a hurricane. I don't want it to rain here. Or if it rains or doesn't rain, it's not a big deal. Shmini Atzeret and rain is only important if you want rain for a few weeks or months in Israel as a farmer. That's the only thing you need it for. Doesn't matter to me in America that it rains exactly during the time of Shmini Atzeret. So this is a completely superfluous holiday and should have died out a long time ago. So let's get rid of it. But of course, we know there are meanings beyond what is in this area. So the connection to Torah was based not on a historical event such as Sinai, but rather on synagogue liturgy. At this time of the year, the end of the book of Deuteronomy was read at the synagogue, completing the reading of the whole Torah. On the Shabbat after Shmini Atzeret, the cycle was begun again with the reading of Genesis 1:1 to celebrate the completion of the holiday. The holiday of Simchat Torah was developed. So in other words, Shmini Atzeret's not just about rain. It's about the concluding of the year, and then we get to start reading Torah again. It is the introduction to the end of the Torah cycle. Does the Torah cycle matter to you if you live in Israel? Yes. Does the Torah cycle matter to you if you live in America? Does it matter to us that how we read the Torah each week? The answer is yes.
Only traditionally. Yeah.
Only traditionally, absolutely. But for us, it doesn't matter if we live in America, Israel, or on the space station, or when we eventually, hopefully in my lifetime, colonize other planets. The Torah cycle is based upon how the moon goes around the earth, and it's apropos for everybody. So in other words, Shmini Atzeret is not just a holiday of rain. And this, as he teaches us, doesn't come to about 1,000 years ago, maybe 1,200 years ago at the earliest. So Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah, the traditions for these holidays are much later. Simchat Torah is not mentioned in the Bible at all. Nothing. Shmini Atzeret, the name is not mentioned, but the 8th day is mentioned. So Sukkot is 7 days. The 8th day is something else. We don't know what it is, but at least it's mentioned in the Torah. The 9th day, Simchat Torah, is not in the Torah at all. That is a purely later developing holiday. Does it mean they did not celebrate Simchat Torah during the time of David? I have absolutely no idea. We cannot prove anything because we have no idea what they were doing. But it can teach us that we don't have evidence of Simchat Torah till whatever it was. I think it's 1,000 years ago, maybe a little bit more. So Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah are connected. Shmini Atzeret has roots in the Torah. Simchat Torah doesn't have any. That is why. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. This is very kind of, this class just raises all these questions. If we're talking about Shmini Atzeret as the 8th day, and then you have this man-made holiday, Simchat Torah, the 9th day. Now, normally, Reform movement, moves things back because you're not worried about, when people, found out about the holiday. So Shmini Atzeret is basically the 7th day. Is that correct? And then Simchat Torah the 8th day, or?
No. Shmini Atzeret
No.
is the 8th day.
So Reform congregations do observe 7 days of
And then
Sukkot
but
plus
often,
Shmini Atzeret plus Simchat Torah.
often Simchat Torah is combined with Shmini Atzeret in the Reform movement as a way to connect it together. Sometimes you can make this 9 days long. I mean, you can add time to it if you want. It's a little bit harder with this holiday because it's so confusing in terms of you have an 8th day, and then, but yes, some will have it as 9 day. It just depends how you look at it. So if we go, for instance, to the, I was going to open the calendar for you, but then everybody will see. Well, let me give you 1 second. I'll open my calendar. So I'll try and get it so you can't see my calendar, except for the calendar part. And then I'll go to the holiday of Simchat Sukkot so that you can see what it is. So let's see if I do this correctly. So birthdays, ecal. All right, taking off everything. Good. Okay. So let's go 1 second. We got to take off one more thing. All right. And hopefully I will not show anything I'm not supposed to show. And if I do, that is a problem. All right, so here is the calendar. All right, so everybody see the calendar? Let me get this, I'm gonna lower this. There you go. All right, so let me go back another week. So Rosh Hashanah is, Erev Rosh Hashanah is on Wednesday. So the 1st of Tishrei is, does everybody see that? Thursday.
Yes.
Now, the reason we have Erev Rosh Hashanah is because in the Torah, it says in the creation story, it was evening, it was morning the first day. Does everybody know from the creation story? So because it says it was evening, then morning the first day, in Judaism, the day starts at sundown. So Rosh Hashanah, it makes it hard on the calendars, obviously. So because the 1st of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, the day before on an American calendar is the 29th of Elul, but once the sun goes down, it's Rosh Hashanah. So Erev Rosh Hashanah is on here. Then we have Rosh Hashanah, 2nd day Rosh Hashanah. Then we go the next week. We keep going to Tishrei. Then we have Erev Yom Kippur. And then Yom Kippur is on the 10th day, Tishrei. And then we have on the 15th of Tishrei, Sukkot starts. And it's Erev Sukkot is the day before. Now, why in the Bible it says the first day of Sukkot is a holiday, but the 2nd day is not a holiday? Only the first day, but a lot of people celebrate the 2nd day of Sukkot as a holiday. Why? So in the Orthodox and conservative world, the first 2 days of Sukkot are major holidays, because there's a belief that sometimes we may start the holiday late, or in ancient Israel it was started by the shofar blowing, and if you didn't hear the shofar, you would start the holiday late. And if you start the holiday late, you miss minutes of the holiday. So what are we going to do? We're going to make the next day a holiday as well. So that's why we have Rosh Hashanah is 2 days. If you want to celebrate for 2 days, the only holiday you don't do this for is obviously Yom Kippur, because fasting for 2 days is a lot more dangerous. So Sukkot 1, Sukkot 2, Sukkot 3. Then we go here. And so we go Sukkot 6, 7. And then, does it say Sukkot 8?
No, Shemini Atzeret.
Shmini Atzeret, and then Simchat Torah.
So,
So now it is 7, 8, 9 days. So there's 9 holiday days. 7 of them are Sukkot officially, and then you have Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. How you define the connection is really up to us. Some would say it's all Sukkot. Some would say it's Sukkot, and then it's Shmini Atzeret, then it's Simchat Torah. Some would say it's 7 days Sukkot, and then Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are combined. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. This is an Orthodox conservative calendar I'm showing you. All right, so basically, if you do the whole Megillah for this month, you've got 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, a day of Yom Kippur, 7 days of Sukkot, 1 day of Shmini Atzeret, and 1 day of Simchat Torah. That is 12 holiday days. Some of them are major holiday days where you don't eat, or you're not supposed to work. Some of them are minor holiday days, like the intermittent days of Sukkot. And so this is why we call it the holiday month, because there are way more holiday days here than all the rest of the year combined. So it makes it very, very, very interesting and exciting, but also long. Yes,
Rabbi,
Flossie.
are we the only group of people that start our holidays at sunset the night before?
That is an excellent question. I don't know. I believe so. I don't know. The Zoroastrians may do it as well. I'll have to look that up, but I don't know. I think we are, but I don't know. The Muslims do, of course, in the Muslim world, they may do in the Muslim world too. I have to check that. That's a good question. I should know that answer. Let's track this back, assume I know the answer, and just don't want to share it with you yet because of time limitations. Or the answer is so long we don't have time for the next 20 minutes. And then I'll look it up later. Rena and then Genevieve.
where did it come from at the time where in between the important holidays, like, in other words, like during the week, and then you get Sukkot, and I'm going to say, where was it told or invented that you didn't have to observe? In other words, you could ride in vehicles, you could watch television, you know what I'm asking?
That's an excellent question, and I'll show you, because this is something in the text. You can only be a major non-work holiday. The only way you can be a major non-work holiday is if it says so in the Torah. So unless it says it in the Torah, there's no such thing as a non-work day Jewish holiday which says you can't work. Even Tisha B'Av, which is a full fast day, memorializing all who died during the destruction of the 2 temples. You fast, you don't wear leather, you read the Book of Lamentations, you go to services, but that is not a non-work day. You can work on Tisha B'Av. Why can you work on Tisha B'Av? Because it's not in the Torah. So the only times you don't work in the Torah is Shabbat during the week, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Georgia football if they're playing during non-Saturday, like if they're playing a bowl game. And let's read what we just read earlier. And this is from here. Let me get to the annotations. And the Eternal spoke, so saying, speak unto the children, was saying, on the 15th day the seventh month is a feast for the tabernacles. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no manner of servile work. It has to specifically tell us in the text there's no work on a day. 7 days you shall bring an offering made by fire to the eternal. Does it say 7 days you will not work?
No.
It does not. It only says on the first day there's no work. And then here it says, on the 8th day shall be a holy convocation to you. You shall bring, oops, I crossed it out, sorry. Offering unto fire. It shall day an assembly. You shall do no manner of servile work. So what we see is Rosh Hashanah, which we don't have the date. We know it's the first day of the 7th month, no work. Yom Kippur, which we do have the name of the holiday, 10th day of the 7th month, don't do work. This holiday, which we call Sukkot, 15th day, no work. And the 23rd day, do no work. So that is specifically told to us. So we know which days are non-work holidays. So that means especially Purim, because it is a book in the Bible, the book of Esther is in the Bible, and is a wonderful holiday, is not a major holiday. Purim is a you can go to work day. Hanukkah, which is so popular, which is a wonderful holiday, is not even in the Bible.
Right.
So it's definitely not a no work day. But again, Purim is in the Bible. At least the book is. And so, but the sages have said, unless it says in the Torah it's a non-work day, you work. Now you cannot work. There's days of the calendar of where you live in. There are rules in Judaism that says you have to live by the rules of the country you live in. So in our country, if it said Sunday is a day nobody's allowed to work because it's the 7th day according to the Christian calendar, we as Jews would say, okay, we're not working because it is the law of the country. So that I'll go read it, and then we'll get to Genesis.
Oh, I'm just saying one more question. Is it true that in Israel they only celebrate one day of Rosh Hashanah?
Yes.
One day of Passover?
No. They
Not
still do
Passover, but Rosh
they do-
Hashanah. Why is that?
Well, and that has to do with the blowing of the shofar. They believe in Israel because you could hear the shofar being blown, you would start the holiday on time. You wouldn't be late.
Oh.
The Reform movement says we have these brilliant calendars and astronomers and mathematicians who can tell us the exact millisecond that the day starts. So we say we're going to take their advice.
Okay.
Genevieve. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. I made a mistake there. I apologize. Rosh Hashanah is the exception. In Israel, you can do it. Some do it 2 days in Israel. That's my bad. Sorry. I was thinking of all the other holidays. Rosh Hashanah is an exception that some people in Israel will celebrate 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And it's a very particular reason. Do you want me to go into the specifics?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go into the specifics.
No, what is it? I just want to know the reason.
It's an important reason to understand. Almost all Jewish holidays happen in the middle of the month. Why? Because the middle of the month is when it's a full moon. The full moon is the middle of the month. So by the 10th of the month, you can already start seeing a little bit more at night. By the middle of the month, the 14th, 15th of a month, you can see at night. That means you can do more stuff. So if you have a holiday, you can do stuff at night. So all of these holidays are starting on the 10th to the 15th, except for Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah starts on the first day of the month. And so, and also the month begins with the blowing of the shofar. So if you're in near Jerusalem or where they're blowing the shofar, you might hear it. But in Israel, they say, because it's the first day of the month and you haven't had any prep time, you may kind of miss the start. So maybe in Israel, you can do 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. But they don't do 2 days of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret. They don't do 2 days of Passover or of Shavuot. So that was my mistake. In Israel,
Right,
the exception is the first day of the month. They'll make that.
right.
Not everybody does it, but they can. And I'm sorry, Genevieve, your question before we conclude.
I have two questions, one silly one and one real one.
Awesome. Both.
So, so if we go by the moon and we're on another planet, then how does that work?
That's an excellent answer. Because if you are in space, for instance, time does not, I mean, if you're in space, time does not, the clock doesn't work for you in the same way.
Right?
On the International Space Station, you're also circling so quickly. So what do they do on the International Space Station? They have a set time they use, however it is. And that time they use coordinates with the Earth. And that's how Judaism will work. It'll be coordinated with, so if we're living on planet
Mars.
No, I'm thinking of one in a different solar system called Hostopia. And we're living on Hostopia, and our crops, and we're growing multicolored carrots. Our holidays are no longer harvest holidays. We will still go by the cycle of the Earth in everything for the holidays. That's what I think. Again, once we do go to planets, which some say is never going to be possible, then the sages of that time period are going to have to make those choices. But as of now, even if you're on the moon or possibly Mars in a few years, as they believe in 10 years will be, you still will follow those calendars. What you will have to do is decide what time zone you're at, obviously. So, and what was your second question?
When, off of her question, when did it become that you couldn't drive?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And these are all connected with the sages of different time periods who make decisions. There's not one sage who makes these. It's not like there's one guy named Eddie and he is immortal and he makes these decisions. When electricity became not just a wonder, but when they started lighting cities in the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries, they had to make decisions based upon modern science. And just as the Talmud and the Torah relate to us in every day, obviously they don't have specific instances. So they had to decide what is considered travel, what is considered work, what is considered lighting a fire. So they concluded, and this is various people, some that the fire, electricity are somehow connected, or that electricity means work. And so turning on the light means either turning on a fire or turning on electricity, and equates to work. Getting in a car may equate to travel. So these are not Talmudic law,
No.
I mean, they are based upon Talmudic law. So it's very easy for Jews to say, I don't believe turning on light is like lighting a fire. I think electricity is something very inherently different. I can do it. And there's always going to be debates because there's always new technology. There's always new things going on. Flossie.
Is that how they got around that term Shabbos Goy?
Yes, that's been around. I don't know when the term had been around, but people had probably been using it in ancient days for various things like lighting fires, but it became much more apropos to the modern world because of all the modern technologies. But it's not only technologies, it's everything changes, and you have to define how it fits in Judaism. I give this example all the time. What has become so popular, people are eating grain-wise because it's healthier. And so eventually rabbis had to make a decision on it. And that is quinoa. Quinoa has become very popular. Nobody cared about quinoa 30 years ago.
Still don't?
Nobody knew about it. All of a sudden, quinoa comes out. It's super popular. And what do rabbis have to decide? They have to, and do they have to decide it's kosher? Not as much because it comes from the earth. It's not like it's a meat product or a milk product. What do they have to decide about quinoa that's so important?
Whether it's kosher for Passover.
Right. Can I eat it for Passover? It is some sort of grainish thing. I still don't know what it is, and I eat it, but I don't know if it's a grain. I can't tell you the difference between hay and wheat, but it is some sort of grain, and we know there are rules about grain for Passover. So is quinoa kosher for Passover? And that was a massive debate.
Sephardic.
And over
What if they're
years.
Sephardic?
Over years in the Sephardic world, it was a less debate because Sephardic world is much more lenient. But in the Ashkenazic world, it was a debate for years and years and years. I did not enter into this debate. I'm happy to wait for somebody to make a decision for me because it's a lot. So it basically came down that most groups in the Orthodox conservative world believe it is kosher for Passover. Most do.
Oh.
In the Sephardic world, almost everything's kosher for Passover. They're much more lenient. It's not as much a big deal. So when it comes,
Is that,
yes,
is that also how cholent came in, that it's cooking slowly and that way they're not?
yes,
Well,
cholent came in as a way to have a hot meal on Shabbat without actually having to cook. You know, you keep the flame low. Can you turn a flame up? And these are all debates that are really important to our religion, even if they're not, debating these things is essential to the future because we have to debate, and technologies are really, and somebody else had a question. I also, the debate that, so many friends have had through the years, and not as much anymore because I used to have a lot of friends who were Orthodox or very or conservative. It's the letter of the law as well. That's important. I can't turn on the TV, and I use this example all the time. But what if I'm not turning on the TV, and the TV is already on, and I'm watching the basketball game or the Super Bowl, which is on a Sunday, so it's not apropos. Or I'm watching, the Georgia Bulldog game. They're playing Alabama, but it's on Saturday as opposed to Saturday night. The TV's been on the whole time. I didn't turn on the TV. You can use fire on Shabbat. Rabbis say fire you can use. What can you not do on Shabbat?
Light the fire.
You can't light it.
Would it be work if you turned off the TV?
Yes, it would be. If you put
Yes.
out the fire,
Yeah.
it's considered work. But if the TV's on, so that is kind of the letter of the law. So most rabbis had to come down and say, you're breaking the spirit of Shabbat by watching TV. Rena.
My mother-in-law, my father-in-law was a rabbi, right? So she would keep this big, well, it wasn't a pot, it was a glass, it was with water in it, hot water on the stove. She lit it before Shabbat on a very low flame and kept it on.
Yep, that's what you do.
That's okay.
That's exactly, and from the Orthodox world and the more traditional world, that is what you do. Because again, even for Jews who keep the laws more strictly, Judaism is still a practical religion. Understand, you probably want to have a warm meal on Saturday. That's probably important. So this is why, but these debates are wonderful because, it's like when I had a friend who loved basketball and he turned the TV on Saturday and watched basketball. And then I'd be at the house watching with him. He said, "Oh my goodness, that was a good game. I only wish I could watch the Rocket game now is on channel 8.
You can't turn the channel.
So what is he doing there as
Yeah,
an Orthodox Jew? He can't say, Robert, can you change the station? First of all, I'm Jewish.
right.
So I can't even though I'm a bad Jew, because you can't ask somebody who's Jewish to be the Shabbos goy.
Right.
He could ask a non-Jew to do it, but again, you don't want to ask somebody to you can ask a non-Jew to be a Shabbos goy because a Shabbos goy is for things that are essential. We're leaving the synagogue, somebody needs to turn on the alarm. That's essential. Changing the station to watch a different basketball game, you can't use a Shabbos goy for that. So when he says, oh, it would be great, what is he not doing?
He's not asking.
He's
Yeah.
not asking me
Yeah.
to do it. So according to the letter of the law, then it's okay. So again, it's all about how you look at things.
Did you do it?
Of course, because I went there to watch the game. That's why I was there. But also you can have a lot of fun.
Isn't there,
I'm sorry.
isn't
Jennifer?
there like a holiday? You guys know more this why I'm in this class, so I can learn. But isn't there a holiday where Jews like sell their stuff and then buy it back after?
Oh, it's Pesach.
That's
Yeah.
Passover. Yeah.
Chametz.
And again, that has to do, very good question, Genevieve, with the practicality of religion. I mean, when I was single, I had no food in the house, literally, because I didn't eat at home. I literally had no food in my house. I didn't have dishes. I didn't have pots and pans. Maybe I had like paper, I had like frozen macaroni and cheese that was non-dairy because but I didn't keep food in my house. So when I sold my chametz to somebody, it was like a couple of cans maybe, and that was it. So it's not a big deal. Now, if I'm going to sell the food in my pantry and move it to somebody else, it is going to take a forklift.
Right.
All the cans and stuff I have in there with the flour. And then I have to schlep it to somebody's house, and somebody
Yeah.
has to hold this stuff in their house, which is very inconvenient. So what you can do is you close the door, put something on it, and say, I go to my friend Phil next door. I'm selling you all of this food, and then or giving it to you, however you want to do it. And then after Passover, I give him $1 and I can open my closet. It's
And
much
you
easier.
don't eat it, right? You don't
And now I
eat
can eat it. Now I can eat it. It's like restaurants. If a restaurant that's kosher, if you want to be Passover kosher as a restaurant, it is an enormous undertaking. You have to remove all the food, clean everything, completely use new pots and pans and dishes. Is it going to be worth it? Probably not. So what do you do instead of doing this? You just
Close.
you close it, you sell it, but not legally. You sell it spiritually to somebody, and then maybe afterwards you give somebody $1. So, or maybe you just close it and you don't feel like you have to do the buying back thing because it's not your house. So this is the legalese, and Judaism is a very legal-minded religion. And so that's why we have all these questions. So, and the questions are important because, again, questioning and discussing and debating is kind of the basis of our entire religion. So any other questions or thoughts?
Just a comment. Mr.
Sure.
Google says that Islam starts days at nightfall.
Yes, yeah. I knew. I was just thinking that after I said wrong because they have to, because Ramadan is
That's right. Yeah.
during the day. So I knew it after I said it, but I wanted to be sure. Ramadan, you keep fast during the day. They fast a whole month during Ramadan, but only during the day. So I knew that. I just forgot. And how do I know so much about Ramadan and how important it is that you fast during the day? And this is also a really interesting note. I used to live in Houston, Texas. I used to be a big basketball fan. I'm not a basketball fan anymore, but I was a basketball fan of the Houston Rockets, which was a basketball team in Houston. And they had a very good team in the 90s. They won 2 championships. And their best player, it was possibly the second best player of the time after Michael Jordan, was a guy named Hakeem Olajuwon. And while he was during his time as a Rocket, he became religious. And so Ramadan he kept strictly, And it happened those years that Ramadan was during the season. And so that meant he had to play professional basketball at night after fasting and not eating all day long.
Oh, God.
So that there's a lot of stories about that. And so that's how we all learned about Ramadan. So
Rabbi, was
Flossie.
this a Shabbos goy? I heard that rumor.
What was a Shabbos Goy?
Elvis.
Elvis could have been a Shabbos Goy. He may have been. Yeah, he knew some Jews growing up. That is true. Yeah, he did actually know some Jews growing up. So he may have done it. I think I've actually heard that story right. I don't know if that's a myth or truth. We have to look that up. That's a good question. So sorry about the Muslim calendar one. I knew the Muslim calendar is a lunar calendar just like our calendar. It's very similar, except they don't have leap year. So that was my mistake. All right. Well, again, holidays coming up. We hope to see you. We won't have class the next 2 weeks. I'll send a note if we're going to have it in 3 weeks because I'm speaking at an elementary school. So hopefully I'll be back in time. All right,
Everybody,
guys. Stay
Thank
safe.
everybody
you.
have
Happy holidays, everybody.
have a
Thank you.
meaningful holiday.